It happened so fast I almost didn't believe what I was seeing. 1 second, Nina was standing in line for a balloon animal at the HOA Fall Fair, her little fingers curled around the edge of the table, smiling at the lady twisting shapes. And the next, Karen Cummings, our HOA president, queen of passive aggression and clipboard tyranny, was standing over her, her voice cutting through the chatter like broken glass. "Take that ridiculous thing off," she snapped, pointing to Nina's brace with a curled lip. "You're not fooling anyone, sweetheart. Kids don't need pity props to get attention around here." I heard it from across the lawn, just as I was helping a neighbor lift a folding table. My blood chilled. By the time I turned, Karen had already reached down, grabbing Nina's leg. Nina screamed and tried to back away, but she lost her balance. Karen didn't stop. With a twisted grin, she yanked the brace off Nina's leg like it was a toy she had stolen from her own child. Nina collapsed to the ground with a sharp, painful cry, her thin leg hitting the concrete with a thud I'll never forget. The balloon lady froze mid-twist. A hush fell across the crowd as people turned. Some gasped. Others whispered. "And Karen?" She laughed. She literally laughed. "She's just dramatic," she told the onlookers, brushing imaginary dust off her pants like Nina was some nuisance she'd just dealt with. "These parents, I swear, they'll do anything to play victim these days." I was sprinting toward them now, every part of me screaming to get to my daughter, to shield her, to stop whatever this madness was. But my legs felt heavy, like I was wading through cement. Nina was curled on the ground, shaking, clutching her knee. Her glittery princess dress was torn at the hem. Her little crown had fallen into the dirt. And Karen stood tall, self-satisfied, chin lifted, as if she had just done the neighborhood a favor. I dropped to my knees beside Nina, scooping her up, checking her leg. She was sobbing, red-faced, saying over and over, "Daddy, why did she do that?" And I couldn't answer. I looked up at Karen, but she was already turning away, waving to another HOA board member like nothing had happened. No apology. No fear. Just cold, smug arrogance. I stood there, holding my daughter, frozen in disbelief and fury. That's the moment I knew, this wasn't just HOA power. It was something darker. Something dangerous. Something I couldn't walk away from anymore. We moved into Willow Glen Estate 6 months before the incident, just me and Nina, starting over after a brutal year neither of us had asked for. I was looking for peace. Stability. A clean patch of earth where my daughter could grow without fear. The brochures said, family-friendly, quiet community, excellent schools. It was perfect on paper. Gated, tree-lined streets. Smiling neighbors. And rules. So many rules. The kind that pretend to protect people, but end up punishing them instead. But I didn't care. After 2 tours overseas and losing Nina's mom to cancer, I thought I could handle just about anything. I didn't expect the biggest threat would come from a woman with pearls and a clipboard. Karen Cummings was the first to welcome us. She showed up the morning after we moved in, no cookies, no smiles, just a packet of HOA bylaws and a warning. "We take appearance seriously here," she said, scanning our lawn like it had insulted her. "Curb appeal reflects character, Mr. Maddox." I remember raising an eyebrow but biting my tongue. I'd dealt with worse attitudes in uniform. I wasn't here to make enemies. I just nodded and thanked her. But it didn't stop there. The first citation came within a week. Improper lawn edging. Then, trash bins visible past the allowed window. A yellow notice taped to our garage door like some scarlet letter of shame. Nina started calling her the rule lady. I tried to make it a joke, something silly. But behind her braces and shy smile, Nina noticed. She always notices. Especially after her surgery, when the kids at her old school started calling her names, mocking her limp, asking why she walked like a robot. Nina's condition wasn't something I talked about much. She was born with a rare muscle disorder, and when she hit 6, doctors recommended intensive surgery to help her walk with less pain. It was grueling: metal pins, long nights in the hospital, endless physical therapy. The brace was part of her healing. Her badge of courage. She wore it with pride, even decorating it with glitter and paint pens. But not everyone saw it that way. Karen didn't like the brace. I caught her staring at it during our first HOA meeting, lips pressed into a tight line. "She's quite expressive," she said afterward, nodding toward Nina, who had brought her sketchbook and was quietly drawing a therapy dog with a superhero cape. "I just hope she doesn't draw too much attention. We try to keep things uniform here." I clenched my fists but said nothing. Karen always couched her jabs in coded language, never overt enough to fight, always just under the surface. But it was clear, Nina made her uncomfortable. And that meant we were on borrowed time. The first real blow came when Nina's therapy dog, Max, was banned from the community park. He'd been trained to detect Nina's muscle tremors, small signs before a fall. He wore a vest. Had all the papers. But after a single complaint from Karen, the HOA posted a new sign at the park entrance: "No animals, service or otherwise, permitted on green areas." I tried to reason with them. I brought documents, vet records, federal law. Karen smiled through it all and said, "I'm sure your intentions are good, but it sets a precedent. If we let one dog in, next thing you know, everyone's bringing in pets. Allergies, lawsuits, we can't risk it." I considered going public. But I didn't want Nina in the middle of a battle. I'd seen what that kind of stress could do to kids, especially ones already carrying heavy things on small shoulders. Instead, we stopped going to the park. I built a small obstacle course in our backyard and made it fun. Nina adapted, because that's what she does. But it chipped away at something. Her excitement. Her sense of belonging. She started asking me why people looked weird at her. Why the neighbor boys laughed when she limped. Why Karen turned and walked the other way when we approached. I told her some people fear what they don't understand. But truthfully, Karen didn't fear Nina. She resented her. Resented how Nina didn't shrink into invisibility the way Karen thought she should. She wanted control, absolute, unquestioned, and Nina's very existence disrupted her perfect picture of the neighborhood. A picture where everything was beige, symmetrical, and smiling for the brochure. It got worse after that. Karen began checking in more often. Walking by our home. Taking photos. Filing complaints about sidewalk chalk or Nina's Halloween decorations being too loud for the HOA's aesthetic. At one point, she even called code enforcement about a cluttered porch. It was Nina's therapy swing, folded and covered when not in use. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, photos. My military instinct kicked in: observe, record, stay patient. But inside, I was seething. Not just for me. For Nina. For what this woman was teaching her about the world. About cruelty disguised as order. About people who weaponize rules against the vulnerable. I still hoped things would calm down. That Karen would get bored or move on. But deep down, I knew better. Women like her don't let go. They escalate. They push until someone breaks. And unfortunately for her, she picked the wrong little girl to humiliate, and the wrong father to underestimate. It started with the sound of tape ripping. Another bright orange HOA citation, slapped across my garage door like some dystopian badge of dishonor. Violation: improper mailbox paint color, HOA Regulation 7.4b. I stared at it for a long moment, blinking. The mailbox was the exact shade of black it had been when we moved in, the same shade half the houses on our block still used. But that didn't matter. Karen had decided it was wrong, and that made it a violation. The citations came like clockwork after that. Lawn edging too irregular. Wind chimes exceeding decibel guidelines. Child noise during restricted quiet hours. That last one almost made me laugh, except Nina had been crying the night before. Crying, because she'd fallen while trying to walk without her brace on for the first time in weeks. It wasn't noise. It was pain. But to Karen, everything about my daughter was an inconvenience. A disruption. A violation. At first, I kept trying to handle it civilly. I emailed the HOA board, filed rebuttals, even offered to repaint the mailbox just to prove I wasn't trying to pick a fight. But nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. I started noticing unfamiliar cars idling outside our house late at night. Figures walking past the property line, phones raised. One morning, I reviewed the footage from my motion sensor camera, and there they were. 2 of Karen's board members creeping through my front garden, using a measuring tape to assess the distance between my recycling bin and the curb. That same week, Nina came to me and said something that stopped me cold. She asked if she could stop going outside. "I don't like how people look at me," she said. "And I think Miss Karen doesn't want me here." That broke something in me. Not because I didn't know it already, but because my 8-year-old daughter had begun internalizing it. She thought she was the problem. That her presence in the neighborhood wasn't just unwanted, but somehow wrong. I took a walk that night, hoping to cool off, to think. At the end of the block, I ran into Shannon Harper, one of the few neighbors who hadn't treated us like lepers. She was out walking her dog, and when I told her what had been going on, she sighed heavily and glanced around before leaning in. "You're not the first one," she said, voice low. "Karen did this to a woman down the street last year. Breast cancer survivor. Put a ramp on her front steps, HOA made her take it down. Said it violated aesthetic regulations." My stomach dropped. "What happened to her?" I asked. Shannon shrugged. "She moved. Couldn't handle the stress anymore. HOA fees kept piling up with the fines. That was it. I knew I couldn't let it go on. I filed a formal complaint against Karen and the HOA board, citing harassment, selective enforcement, and unlawful surveillance. I attached photos, timestamps, everything. I made sure the email had read receipts. The reply came 3 days later, brief and smug: "We have no record of your previous communications. Please direct any future complaints to the HOA general inbox. Sincerely, Willow Glen Board President, Karen Cummings." No record. No acknowledgement. Just a digital shrug. I printed everything and hand-delivered a hard copy to the HOA office, watched the receptionist place it on a stack of papers under her desk. "We'll be in touch," she said, without looking me in the eye. That afternoon, Karen appeared at our property line. Not on the sidewalk, inside the fence, clipboard in hand, tapping at her phone. I stepped outside and asked her to leave. She smiled, wide and artificial. "Just a routine inspection. We had a noise complaint." "Something about your daughter screaming at night?" My hands clenched. "That was physical therapy," I said. "She's recovering from surgery." Karen shrugged like that wasn't her concern. "We just have to keep things peaceful for everyone. Rules are rules." Then she paused, narrowing her eyes with theatrical concern. "Maybe you're not adjusting well to the expectations of this community, Mr. Maddox." I asked again if she had received my complaint. She clicked her tongue. "Oh, that. You're under the impression that the HOA board will take your side?" Her smile widened into something almost gleeful. "You need to understand something. I am the board." And there it was. The truth. She wasn't following rules, she was the rules. And she enjoyed it. Every inch of power, every threat hidden under a silk scarf and signature pen. This wasn't about maintaining standards or property values. It was about domination. Control. Silencing the people she deemed messy, or complicated, or simply too different for her pristine little kingdom. That night, I sat at the dining table with Nina asleep upstairs, her brace propped beside her bed. I stared at the pile of citations, the HOA bylaws, the photographs, the emails, all the paper armor I thought might shield us from what was coming. But I knew now it wouldn't. Not against someone like Karen. She didn't just bend the rules, she wrote them in pencil and erased them when it suited her. And she had no idea who she was dealing with. Not yet. Because I wasn't just some tired dad with a disabled daughter. I was a soldier. A protector. And I had spent a lifetime learning how to dismantle structures from the inside out. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the cul-de-sac as Willow Glen's annual Halloween fair unfolded in a parade of squeals, plastic pumpkins, and the rustling of candy wrappers. Booths lined the sidewalks, manned by HOA-approved volunteers dressed in cheery orange and black. Kids in store-bought costumes darted between games, laughter echoing off perfectly trimmed hedges. For once, the neighborhood felt almost normal, alive, even. Nina had been looking forward to this day for weeks. It was her first real outing since the brace had been adjusted to help her walk longer distances. She'd chosen her costume weeks ago, a lavender princess gown with sparkly sleeves and a matching tiara that kept slipping sideways on her short, curly hair. The leg brace, once a point of shame for her, had been transformed. We'd decorated it together with glitter tape and stick-on gemstones, making it look like royal armor. She stood beside me, eyes wide with joy, watching the balloon artist twist a green and yellow dragon. "Daddy, can we get popcorn after this?" she asked, tugging my sleeve with that same innocent excitement that reminded me how young she still was, despite everything she'd been through. Of course, I smiled, ruffling her hair. "Just don't eat too much, or the candy will turn you into a gremlin." She giggled and held onto my hand tighter. But then, as if summoned by the moment of joy, Karen emerged from the crowd, her sharp features twisted into something that passed for a smile. Dressed in a black pantsuit, no costume, of course, and armed with her usual clipboard, she glided toward us with the stiff grace of someone who thought they were royalty. Her eyes scanned Nina from head to toe. "Well," she said, just loud enough for nearby parents to hear, "aren't we dramatic today?" Her gaze lingered on the glitter-covered brace. "Do you really need to wear that? Or is this part of the costume?" I felt Nina's hand tighten around mine. I turned to answer, but just then, one of the HOA volunteers approached me. "Mr. Maddox, sorry to interrupt, someone parked in a non-resident zone, and your car is listed. Could you come with me real quick?" Karen raised her eyebrows as if to say, "See?" But I nodded, crouching beside Nina. "I'll be right back. Stay here, okay? Just 5 minutes. Don't move." She nodded, giving me a nervous smile. I squeezed her hand once, then followed the volunteer toward the parking area. I wasn't gone more than 3 minutes. But that was long enough. Later, people would say they weren't sure what happened. That they thought it was part of some performance. But it wasn't a show. Karen had waited for the moment I walked away. She stepped closer to Nina, hands folded like a strict schoolteacher. "You know," she said, voice syrupy with disdain, "pretending to be injured for sympathy is a form of manipulation. Do you like tricking people into giving you attention?" Nina looked up, her smile gone, lips trembling. "I'm not pretending," she whispered. "It helps me walk." Karen scoffed. "Sweetheart, if you can stand there in that dress, you can stand without that crutch. Enough of the games." She leaned down and, in one swift motion, grabbed the brace by the strap. "No!" Nina screamed, stumbling backward. "Please don't," but Karen yanked. The Velcro tore free with a sickening sound, and the brace came off. Nina's knee buckled instantly. Her leg, still fragile and underdeveloped, couldn't hold her weight. She crumpled sideways, hitting the edge of the booth's wooden frame before collapsing to the pavement with a sharp, audible thud. A gasp ripped through the crowd. The balloon artist dropped her pump. A mother nearby shielded her child's eyes. People froze, staring, unsure if they'd really seen what they thought they had. Karen, standing over Nina with the brace in hand, actually smiled. "Oh, she's fine," she said, waving dismissively. "She's just being dramatic. Kids these days, so much theatrical behavior." But Nina wasn't fine. She lay curled on the ground, tears streaking her cheeks, tiara askew, her lavender dress dirted and torn. Her tiny fingers scraped at the pavement, trying to sit up, her voice cracking as she cried, "Daddy." That's when I heard her. I broke into a sprint, shoving through the forming crowd. "Move!" I shouted, my voice barely human. "Nina!" I dropped to my knees beside her, scooping her up into my arms. Her body was trembling, her leg visibly swollen. "She took it," she sobbed. "She said I was lying." I looked up and saw Karen standing there, still holding the brace in one hand like a hunter with her prize. My heart pounded so hard I could barely see. All around us, people were watching, but not with the usual HOA apathy. This time, they were horrified. Phones had come out. One woman was already recording, her mouth covered with her hand, shaking her head in disbelief. Karen finally noticed. Her smile faltered, then vanished altogether. The last thing I remember before the whole scene blurred into sirens and shouting was the expression on Karen's face, tight-lipped, defensive, suddenly aware that her power wasn't as bulletproof as she thought. I looked straight at her, holding Nina close. And in that moment, I didn't see a neighbor or a board president. I saw a monster exposed. The screen freezes on my face, rage burning, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the woman who hurt my daughter. And that was the moment everything changed. The emergency room was quiet except for the faint beeping of monitors and the hushed tones of nurses passing through the hallway. I sat in the corner of Nina's room, elbows on my knees, fingers laced so tightly they turned white. Nina lay asleep, wrapped in thin hospital blankets, her face pale, bruised on one side where she hit the pavement. Her new X-rays showed the worst. Her knee had taken damage, ligament stressed, healing reversed. She was back to square one. And worse, the fall had left her with a mild concussion. The doctors said she needed rest, more therapy, and probably another brace, custom-built to replace the one that had been torn off her leg. I'd spent years training to keep calm in chaos. I'd disarmed men with rifles, stared down death more than once. But nothing had ever lit a fire inside me like seeing my daughter crumpled on the ground, crying out in pain while a grown woman stood above her with a smirk. By the next morning, it was all over the neighborhood, though not the way you'd expect. Instead of outrage, I woke up to find the HOA had already sent out an official, community update email. Karen's words, practically verbatim. Yesterday's unfortunate incident involving the Maddox family was a result of a misunderstanding regarding appropriate behavior at a family event. We understand emotions run high, but we encourage all residents to model grace and respect. False victim narratives are harmful to community unity. There it was, black and white. Not only was she refusing to admit what she did, she was doubling down. Worse, she painted us as the problem. She even went a step further, implying that I was using my daughter's condition as leverage for attention. I wanted to throw something through a window. But I didn't. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I contacted a local attorney that afternoon, a family rights specialist named Claire Whitman. She listened to everything without interrupting, took notes, asked the right questions. When I mentioned the physical assault and cited medical evidence, she nodded slowly. But then she pulled out a file and opened to a section of the Willow Glen HOA bylaws. "You're not going to like this," she said. "Their internal charter gives sweeping legal protection to the board. Any incident occurring at an HOA-sanctioned event is considered community-handled, unless criminal charges are pursued, and that's only if the HOA agrees it warrants escalation." "So she can assault a child in public," I said, voice shaking, "and claim it was a community issue?" "She's insulated," Claire said. "And unfortunately, she's done this before. I've dealt with Karen Cummings once. She's extremely well-connected." It felt like trying to punch through concrete. But then, a sliver of hope. That evening, as I was helping Nina into bed, her new temporary brace awkward and stiff, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but answered out of habit. The voice on the other end was quiet but firm. "This is Melissa Hammond. I was at the Halloween fair yesterday. I recorded the whole thing." For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I asked, "You caught it on video?" "Yes," she said. "And I wasn't the only one. I know what I saw. Your daughter wasn't faking anything. That woman ripped the brace right off her. Melissa sent the footage to me within the hour. It wasn't perfect, shaky, with kids screaming in the background, but it was clear. The moment Karen leaned down, the look on Nina's face, the fall, the sound of the crowd. Karen's smug laughter. And my daughter's cry for help. With the video in hand, I thought justice would be swift. I reached out to local media, 3 stations, 2 online outlets, 1 print newspaper. I sent the footage. Explained what happened. Attached medical reports. But the replies came back cold. "We're currently focusing on election coverage. Due to privacy concerns, we can't report on minors without official statements." Karen Cummings? She sits on our advisory board. That last one told me everything I needed to know. She had ties to local politics. To money. To influence. But I wasn't out of options. I scrolled through my old contacts until I found a name I hadn't dialed in years, Ray Tucker. We served together in Afghanistan. Tough as nails. Smart. And now, Deputy Chief of Staff for the State Housing and Community Affairs Committee. When he answered, it was like no time had passed. "Maddox? Jesus, man. You still breathing?" "Barely," I said. "Listen, I've got a problem. A big one. And it involves a child, an HOA tyrant, and a system that's protecting her." I explained everything. The harassment. The video. The backlash. The media blackout. Ray listened in silence, then said just 2 words, "Send everything." 10 minutes later, I had forwarded every file, every citation, every second of that video. 20 minutes after that, he replied, "You just lit a match. Let's burn it down." For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Karen thought she was untouchable. That she could hurt my daughter, smear us publicly, and hide behind HOA policy like a shield. But she didn't know the fire she'd started. She'd made a mistake. A loud, public, documented one. And now, the reckoning was coming. The morning after the investigators left, I sat at my desk with 3 things: a mug of bitter coffee, a manila folder filled with the HOA's internal financial statements, and a sharp, slow-burning rage. Ray, our neighbor who once worked in HOA compliance for the city, leaned over my shoulder as we combed through line after line of expenses. The first red flag jumped out at us like a firecracker. "What the hell is a recreational hospitality fund?" I asked, pointing at a vague entry. Ray narrowed his eyes. "That's not standard. There's no authorization for a secondary spending fund unless it's been voted on by residents. And I've never heard of this being discussed at any meeting." We dug deeper. The fund, disguised with misleading labels like community upkeep and event coordination, had quietly funneled over $18,000 in the last year to venues, catering companies, and even a personal chauffeur service. And every single invoice linked back to Karen's circle. "She's been throwing private parties, on HOA money," Ray growled. "And not just that, look at this. She filed a reimbursement for a birthday cake. Says it was for a Community Leader Appreciation Day. Her birthday was 3 weeks ago," I muttered. Unbelievable. But that was just the beginning. I made a call to an old contact, Maya, a legal aide who worked with the state HOA regulatory board. I gave her the file, and she promised to fast-track it. "Daniel," she warned, "this isn't her first rodeo." That's when everything shifted. Maya sent me an old civil court filing. 5 years ago, Karen had been sued by a disabled veteran named Isaiah Collins. She had harassed him repeatedly, called the police to report his erratic behavior, and once even tried to get his therapy dog removed by claiming it was aggressive. The case settled out of court. Buried and forgotten, until now. She's a pattern abuser, Maya confirmed. And this one's escalating. Ray and I called an emergency meeting with the residents we knew had also suffered under Karen's reign. Some were hesitant. Years of being silenced will do that to a community, but once the doors closed in Ray's basement, the stories poured out. "My son has autism," said one mother. "She told me he was a public liability. That she'd file a safety violation if he touched the swings again. She fined me $250 for leaving my trash bin out 30 minutes past pickup," said a retiree. "But her gardener left clippings all over the sidewalk for 2 days and nothing. She said I was lowering property values," another man said, voice shaking. "Because of my accent." It all became fuel. We organized. Ray drafted a formal complaint to the State Oversight Agency, signed by 24 residents. We uploaded the financial documents. I included the settlement Karen had tried to bury. But the masterstroke? The video. The footage of Karen ripping Nina's brace off was now backed up on multiple hard drives and uploaded to a private drive. We were ready to unleash it. We scheduled a public town meeting, one that, by law, the HOA had to open to residents if petitioned by 10 or more homeowners. We had triple that. The room was packed. Folding chairs scraped the hardwood floors of the community hall. Neighbors whispered. Tension hung thick. Karen strutted in, wearing an expensive purple blazer, like she was showing up for an award ceremony. "Nice of you all to show," she said, smiling smugly. "Is this another complaint circle, or is someone finally going to thank me for keeping this place in order?" Ray stood. "We've come to present documented misconduct, fraud, and abuse under your leadership." Karen laughed. "You people are all soft. You think real communities function without order?" I stood, clicked the remote, and the projector came to life behind me. The room went dead silent. There, on the screen, in crystal clarity, Karen, screaming. Karen, lunging. Karen yanking the brace from Nina's leg. And then Karen smiling. Laughing. People gasped. One woman cried. Another man stood up and muttered, "Jesus Christ." Karen paled. "You want order?" I said, stepping closer. "You brutalized a child with a medical disability and laughed. You're a fraud. A bully. And you're done." She reached for the mic, but nobody gave it to her. Ray read the signatures on the petition. Maya, now joining via Zoom, confirmed the official complaint had been filed and was under state review. For once, Karen had nothing to say. The reckoning had begun. The courthouse buzzed with tension that morning. The air was thick, not just with the humidity of a southern summer, but with a collective anticipation. Neighbors, journalists, even city officials packed the gallery, whispering in low tones about the Karen case. On the docket, Raymond Harper vs. Karen Whitmore, civil lawsuit for assault, defamation, and HOA misconduct. But beneath the legal language lay something deeper. This wasn't just a court case, it was a reckoning. Ray adjusted his tie, seated beside his lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Alicia Monroe who had taken the case pro bono after seeing the security footage on local news. At the other end of the room, Karen sat flanked by two high-priced attorneys and wearing a smug look that hadn't faded since her arrest. She was dressed in white, as if to visually proclaim her innocence. But even the press knew better now. Behind Ray sat an army of neighbors, people who had once remained silent or even sided with the HOA. But after the footage of Karen ripping off Nina's leg brace hit the airwaves, public sentiment shifted violently. Signs of support for Ray's family lined lawns. The same people who once whispered judgments about Nina's dramatics now wore pins that read, "Justice for Nina." The judge entered. Silence fell like a curtain. Alicia called her first and most crucial witness, Nina. The courtroom projector blinked to life, and there she was, Nina, live from her bedroom via secure video link. Her voice shook, but she didn't falter. "She said I was pretending," Nina said, and then, she pulled it off. "My leg twisted. I fell." She laughed. Karen scoffed audibly, causing a ripple through the audience. The judge raised a brow. "Ms. Whitmore, do that again and I'll hold you in contempt," he warned. Ray clenched his jaw. His daughter was reliving trauma, and Karen couldn't even fake remorse. Alicia clicked through security footage. Frame by frame, the screen showed the moment, the exact moment. Karen lunged, yanked the brace, and smiled as Nina crumpled to the ground. Audible gasps filled the room. Karen's lawyers tried to object, but the judge overruled. During cross-examination, Karen's attorney tried to downplay it all. "You've claimed your daughter is disabled, Mr. Harper. But have you ever considered—" "I don't claim anything," Ray interrupted, his voice steady but icy. "My daughter's condition is medically documented. Would you like the MRI scans?" Karen shrunk slightly in her seat. After lunch, the gallery was full again. Reporters stood by the courthouse steps, broadcasting live. Headlines flooded social media: HOA president accused of assaulting disabled child in court showdown, father seeks justice after daughter's leg brace ripped off in public, HOA culture of harassment faces legal reckoning. By afternoon, Ray's neighbors testified, one after the other, about Karen's reign of pettiness. Denied ramp permits. Threats over wheelchair-accessible doors. Ignoring ADA requests. She said, "Disabled or not, rules are rules," one woman sobbed. "And when I said that was illegal, she told me to move." The judge took notes. His face, unreadable but focused. The verdict came 2 days later. Karen was found guilty of civil assault, defamation, and abuse of position. The judge fined her $250,000, half to Nina's college trust, the other half as civil penalties to the state for HOA misconduct. And then came the part Karen never expected. The judge turned to the HOA council. "I am recommending a full audit of this HOA by the State Oversight Board. Your leadership has failed this community and its residents, especially those requiring disability accommodations." Within 48 hours, the board dissolved itself. The state assigned a neutral administrator. Karen was stripped of her presidency and banned from holding any HOA position in the future. She tried to fight it, issuing a smug statement to local news: this was political correctness run amok. But the community wasn't buying it anymore. Someone spray-painted "Faker" across her garage in blood-red letters. Her once pristine lawn was egged by neighborhood teens. Kids refused to play with her grandkids. Her reputation, once polished, was dust. Ray didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He sat on his porch one evening, Nina beside him, her new brace shining in the sunset light. "She doesn't matter anymore," she whispered. I don't feel small now. You were never small, sweetie, Ray replied. She just couldn't see your strength. In that moment, surrounded by a community that had finally opened its eyes, Ray knew, Karen's collapse wasn't just legal. It was total. The seasons had turned. Summer faded into a golden fall, and with it, the chaos that had once poisoned our neighborhood slowly melted into memory. A new dawn had taken root, quiet, calm, and earned through blood, truth, and community reckoning. In front of our house, I planted a small flower garden, not for decoration, but as a tribute. It bloomed with soft marigolds, bright daisies, and deep blue irises, Nina's favorites. A bench rested nearby, perfectly placed under the shade of the old maple. It was her corner now, her peace. Every morning, she'd sit there with Oreo, our stubborn but loyal pug, who'd bark at butterflies like they were invaders. The HOA board was gone, all of them. After the court ruling, resignations flooded in like a dam burst. A new board was elected, real neighbors, not bureaucrats with a taste for power. People we knew. People who waved. People who showed up. I still remember the first time Ms. Dwyer, the woman who used to keep her blinds closed, knocked on our door. "If you ever need anything," she said, placing a warm banana bread in my hands, "we're here." It hit me harder than I expected. Nina's new leg brace arrived 2 weeks after the trial. Custom designed. Lightweight. Strong. Decorated with flower decals and a tiny lightning bolt. She ran, not limped, not dragged, ran across the lawn the first time she wore it. I nearly broke watching her. I stood by the gate that once was defaced with notices and fines. The same gate now bore a handmade sign, "Neighborhood Watch, run by respect." Looking into the camera, I said, "This isn't just about HOA power. It's about what happens when we ignore cruelty wrapped in a clipboard and a smile. It's about standing up, not just for your family, but for what's right." My daughter didn't fake her strength. She proved it. And maybe now, so did we. The camera pulled back slowly. Nina laughed in the background, chasing Oreo, who was barking at a falling leaf. The sunlight caught her brace, making it shine like something sacred. Like justice made visible. Fade out. If this story hit home, don't scroll past. HOA abuse isn't rare, it's just hidden behind closed doors and polite smiles. We tell the stories others are too scared to share. Subscribe to HOA Karen Shorts and help us keep the light on the dark corners of fake power, real pain, and true justice. Movie camera. This was HOA Karen Shorts, because silence protects the wrong people.